I've spent my life designing spaces that are meant to last. Homes, offices, community centers, structures built on solid foundations. I live in a quiet suburban house that I designed myself, a place that was once filled with the laughter of my daughter Jessica, but has since grown quiet. After my husband passed away 10 years ago, it was just the two of us against the world, and I poured everything I had into giving her the best life possible. My architectural firm, which I built from the ground up, was meant to be my legacy, but more importantly, it was the engine that funded her dreams. But as you're about to hear, I recently discovered that while I was busy building a foundation for her future, she was busy digging a hole under mine, one deep enough to bury us both. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Trust, in my profession, is everything. A client trusts you with their vision, their money, and a piece of their future. You build that trust block by block, decision by decision. It's a slow, meticulous process, not unlike raising a child. For 22 years, I believed the trust I had built with my daughter, Jess, was the most solid structure in my life. It was a shelter I thought could withstand any storm. Looking back now, I see I was the architect of my own disaster, and I never even inspected the foundations. After my husband Tom died, Jess became the absolute center of my universe. She was only 12, a difficult age for any child to lose a parent, and I overcompensated in every way I could. I wanted to be her mother, her father, and her best friend all rolled into one. I worked tirelessly to ensure her life remained as stable and comfortable as possible. The firm I had started with Tom became my sole focus, not for my own ambition, but because its success was directly tied to Jess's well-being. Every late night at the office, every weekend spent poring over blueprints was for her. I wanted to give her the world, and for a long time, I thought I was succeeding. Jess was a bright, charismatic girl. She had her father's easy smile and a charm that could win over anyone. As she grew into a young woman, she developed a passion for social media. It started innocently enough. Fashion posts, makeup tutorials, snapshots of her life. I was proud of her creativity and her ability to connect with people online. When she decided against a traditional college path to pursue a career as a lifestyle influencer, I supported her. It was a new world, one I didn't fully understand, but I trusted her judgment. I saw the same drive in her that I had when I was her age, just pointed in a different direction. To help her get started, I gave her a supplementary credit card linked to my primary account. The initial understanding was clear. It was for business expenses. Camera equipment, software, travel for collaborations, outfits for shoots, anything that would help build her brand. The limit was generous, but I trusted her to be responsible. For the first year or two, everything seemed fine. She would show me her growing follower count, the brands she was partnering with, the positive comments that flooded her posts. She was creating a life for herself, and I was her silent biggest investor. Her expenses were high, but I reasoned that building a business, any business, required upfront capital. The charges that came through were from brands I recognized, tech stores, and airlines. It all seemed legitimate. Whenever a particularly large charge appeared, I'd ask her about it. She always had a ready and plausible explanation. "Oh, that was for the drone, Mom. The aerial shots are getting so much engagement." Or, "That was the deposit for the content creators retreat in Bali. The networking opportunities are priceless." I never questioned her further. Why would I? She was my daughter. The trust was implicit, absolute. About a year ago, she introduced me to Ben. He was a few years older, slick and confident, and called himself a startup founder. He was always talking about disruption, synergy, and scaling, a whirlwind of buzzwords that sounded impressive but lacked substance. He showered Jess with attention and praise, telling her she was a superstar in the making. He saw her potential, he said, and wanted to help her optimize her brand. I didn't like him from the start. It was a gut feeling, the kind you can't quite articulate. He seemed more interested in the lifestyle Jess projected than in Jess herself. He was always in the background of her photos, wearing designer clothes I suspected she'd paid for. He drove a luxury car, but when I once asked him what his startup actually did, he gave me a vague, rambling answer about a pre-revenue blockchain solution for the influencer marketing space. It sounded like nonsense, but Jess was smitten. She saw him as a visionary, a partner who understood her world in a way I couldn't. David, my oldest friend and lawyer, was more direct. After meeting Ben at a family dinner, he pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Be careful, Morgan," he'd warned, his voice low. "That kid is a ghost. All flash, no substance. He looks at your daughter like she's a winning lottery ticket." I brushed off his concerns, attributing them to the overprotectiveness of an old friend. "He makes her happy, David," I'd replied, a little too defensively. "She's an adult. She can make her own choices." But Ben's arrival marked a shift. The credit card bills started creeping higher. The expenses became more extravagant. 5-star hotels, Michelin-starred restaurants, luxury brand shopping sprees. When I tried to talk to Jess about it, she would get defensive, with Ben often whispering in her ear. "Mom, you don't get it. This is the brand. You have to spend money to make money. It's all about creating an aspirational image." Ben would nod in agreement, adding, "We're building an empire, Morgan. You have to think bigger." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this was the cost of success in her chosen field. So I quieted the uneasy feeling in my stomach. I continued to pay the bills, reassured by her promises that a huge brand deal was just around the corner, one that would pay everything back and then some. My trust in her was a blind spot, a gaping vulnerability in the otherwise carefully designed structure of my life. I had spent so long being her protector, her provider, that I never considered the possibility that the greatest threat to my security wasn't out in the world, but living right under my roof, using my love and trust as her personal line of credit. The foundation I thought was concrete was actually crumbling, and I was about to find out just how deep the damage went. The day my world tilted on its axis started like any other Tuesday. I was in my home office, reviewing blueprints for a new library project, the morning sun streaming through the large window overlooking my garden. The smell of coffee hung in the air, and the quiet hum of the house was a comfort. It was in these moments, surrounded by my work and the home I'd built, that I felt most at peace. I had a meeting with the city council at noon, and my morning was a carefully managed sequence of tasks. Then my phone buzzed. It was Jess. "Hey, Mom!" "Are you busy?" Her voice was unnaturally cheerful, bubbling with an energy that immediately put me on edge. It was the voice she used when she wanted something. "I'm working, honey. I've got that big meeting in a couple of hours. Is everything okay?" "Everything is amazing," she chirped. "Ben and I have the most incredible news, and we want to tell you in person. We're just around the corner. Can we pop by for a few minutes? I have a surprise for you." A surprise. My mind immediately jumped to the obvious conclusion. An engagement. Despite my reservations about Ben, I felt a pang of warmth. My little girl getting married. It was a milestone, a new chapter. I pushed aside my work, my architect's brain switching from building codes to wedding venues. "Of course, sweetie. Come on over. The coffee is still fresh." "Great. We'll be there in 5, she said, and hung up before I could say another word. I tidied the living room, my mind racing. I smoothed my blouse and ran a hand through my hair, a nervous flutter in my chest. This was it, a new phase of life. Maybe David and I were wrong about Ben. Maybe his love for Jess was real. She sounded so happy. When the doorbell rang, I opened it to a beaming Jess and a smug-looking Ben. He was wearing a ridiculously expensive-looking watch and sunglasses he didn't bother to take off indoors. Jess, however, was radiant. She threw her arms around me in a tight hug. "Mom, you look great," she said, pulling away and taking my hands. "Are you ready? This is going to change everything." "I think I am," I smiled, looking from her to Ben. "So, what's this big news?" Ben stepped forward, a proprietary arm around Jess's shoulder. "Morgan," he began, using that overly familiar tone I despised. "Jess and I have been working on something huge. A new venture that's going to redefine the influencer landscape." My smile faltered. This wasn't an engagement. This was a business pitch. I felt a familiar wave of disappointment, but quickly masked it. "Oh, that's wonderful. What kind of venture?" Jess's eyes danced with excitement. "It's a platform, Mom. A subscription-based community for aspiring creators. We'll offer exclusive content, mentorship, networking events. It's going to be massive. We're calling it Elysian Fields." "Elysian Fields," I repeated slowly. It sounded pretentious, but I kept that thought to myself. "That sounds very ambitious." "It is," Ben said, puffing out his chest. "And we've already secured our seed funding. That's the big news, the surprise. Jess reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a crisp, white envelope. It was thick and had the logo of a prominent commercial lending institution embossed in the corner. She held it out to me, her hand trembling slightly with excitement. "I wanted you to be the first to know," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "You've always supported my dreams, and now they're finally coming true. This is for you." I took the envelope, a strange sense of foreboding creeping over me. Why would she be giving me a document from a lender? "Jess, what is this?" "Open it," she urged, bouncing on the balls of her feet. I broke the seal and slid out the contents. It was a multi-page loan agreement. My eyes scanned the header, then moved to the principal amount. The number was so large I thought it had to be a typo. I read it again, my heart starting to pound against my ribs. And then a third time. There was no mistake, $600,000, my breath caught in my throat. I looked down the page, my vision blurring. Borrower, Jessica Miller. Co-borrower. My eyes landed on the name and the floor seemed to drop out from beneath me. Morgan Miller, followed by my signature. A perfect digital forgery of my signature. "What is this?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The blood was roaring in my ears. "It's the funding," Jess exclaimed, completely oblivious to my state of shock. "We got it!" $600,000 to launch the company. Isn't it amazing? I looked from the forged document in my hand to my daughter's smiling face. The cheerful, excited expression was still there. She had no idea what she had done. Or worse, maybe she did. "Jess?" I started, my voice shaking. "My name is on this, as co-borrower, and my signature." Ben stepped in, placing a calming hand on Jess's arm. "It was just a formality, Morgan. The bank needed the backing of an established business person to approve a loan of this size. Your credit score is impeccable. We knew you'd want to help." "Help?" I felt a cold fury rising within me, eclipsing the shock. "Help is something you ask for. You don't take it. You don't forge my name on a legal document for over $500,000. This is fraud." Jess's smile finally vanished, replaced by a look of confusion, then annoyance. "Mom, don't be so dramatic. It's not a big deal. The business is going to be a huge success. We'll pay the loan back in the first year, easy. This is our big break." "Your big break?" I held up the papers, my hand trembling with rage. "This is a 20-year commercial loan, with interest rates that could cripple my firm." "What assets did you list as collateral?" Ben cleared his throat. "Well, the bank required significant collateral for an unsecured business loan." My eyes shot to the section on collateral, and there it was, in black and white. My house, my firm's business assets, everything. They had leveraged my entire life against their half-baked, buzzword-laden fantasy. I looked at my daughter, the child I had devoted my life to, and I saw a stranger. A stranger who had, with a forged signature and a dazzling smile, just put a gun to the head of everything I had ever worked for. "Get out," I said, the words low and dangerous. Jess was taken aback. "What? Mom, what are you talking about?" "We came here to celebrate." "Celebrate?" My voice rose, cracking with a mixture of pain and fury. "You celebrate. You came here and handed me a $600,000 debt secured by my home and my business, a debt I never agreed to, a debt you signed my name to illegally. There is nothing to celebrate. Get out of my house, now." Ben started to speak, some placating nonsense about misunderstandings, but I cut him off with a look so sharp it made him flinch. He grabbed Jess's arm. "Come on, Jess, your mom's just in shock." "She'll come around." Jess looked at me, her eyes welling up with tears of frustration and anger, not remorse. "I can't believe you're reacting like this," she sobbed. "I do this one amazing thing, this one big thing to finally make you proud, and you throw it in my face. I thought you believed in me." "I believed in you," I said, my voice dropping to a raw, broken whisper as they walked out the door. "But you never believed in telling me the truth." I stood alone in my living room, the loan agreement clutched in my hand. The house that had felt like a sanctuary just minutes before now felt like a cage, its walls collateral in a deal I never made. The surprise wasn't an engagement. It was a betrayal of the highest order, a calculated act of deception that had turned my trust into a weapon against me. And in the chilling silence, I knew two things for certain. First, I was in more trouble than I could possibly imagine. And second, I would not let them get away with it. The minutes after they left were a blur of numb disbelief. I sank onto my sofa, the loan documents spread across the coffee table like the scene of a crime. My mind, usually so adept at finding order in chaos, at seeing the structural integrity of a plan, was a whirlwind of panic and rage. I reread the terms of the loan over and over, each clause a nail in my financial coffin. The interest rate was variable but started at a punishingly high percentage. The repayment schedule was aggressive, with the first payment due in 30 days. Default would trigger immediate seizure of assets, my home, my business, my entire life's work, pledged as a guarantee for a dream I had no part in. The signature was what haunted me the most. It was a flawless replica. Jess had seen me sign countless documents over the years. Permission slips, checks, contracts. She had my signature down to the precise angle of the M and the characteristic loop of the N. It was a chillingly intimate act of forgery. She had studied me, not to understand me, but to mimic me for her own gain. My first coherent thought was, David. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers feeling clumsy and disconnected from my brain. I dialed his number and he picked up on the second ring. Hey, Morgan. How'd the meeting with the council go? His cheerful voice boomed through the phone. I couldn't speak. A strangled sob escaped my lips instead. The cheerfulness in his voice vanished, replaced by immediate concern. Morgan, what's wrong? What happened? David, I need you, I managed to choke out. Can you come over? Something terrible has happened. I'm on my way, he said without a moment's hesitation. While I waited, I paced the length of my living room, the slick, heavy paper of the loan agreement a toxic weight in my hands. The scale of the deception was beginning to sink in. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment mistake. This was a calculated plan. They would have needed my financial information, my social security number, my business tax ID, my income statements, my asset valuations. How did they get all of that? My mind flashed to a few weeks prior. Jess had called me in a panic, claiming her laptop had crashed and she'd lost a file for a college financial aid application she was supposedly helping a friend with. She asked if she could use my office computer. I was on a conference call and, without thinking, gave her my password. Just for an hour, Mom, I promise. It's a lifesaver. She had been in my office, with unsupervised access to my entire digital life. At the time, I saw it as a daughter needing help. Now I saw it as a heist. She wasn't helping a friend. She was robbing her mother. When David arrived, he found me sitting on the floor, leaning against the sofa, the papers laid out before me. He took one look at my face and was kneeling beside me in an instant. My God, Morgan, what is it? I couldn't form the words, so I just pushed the top page of the agreement towards him. He picked it up, his brow furrowed in confusion. I watched his eyes move across the page, saw the exact moment he understood. His face hardened, the friendly concern replaced by a lawyer's cold, focused anger. Tell me everything, he said, his voice grim, and so I did. I told him about Jess and Ben's surprise visit, the Elysian Fields venture, the forged signature, the collateral. I told him about the incident with my computer. As I spoke, the narrative of my own foolishness became painfully clear. The red flags I'd ignored, the extravagant spending I'd excused, the blind trust I had so freely given. It was a textbook case of financial abuse, and I had been the willing, unknowing victim. David listened patiently, his gaze never leaving mine. He didn't interrupt, he didn't judge. He just let me pour out the entire sordid story. When I was finished, a heavy silence filled the room. Finally he spoke, his tone measured and professional, a clear sign he had shifted into lawyer mode. Okay, first things first. We need to verify the authenticity of this loan. I know a senior VP at that lending institution. I'll make a call. We also need to file a police report. This is identity theft and fraud, Morgan. It's a felony. I flinched at the words. A police report. My own daughter. The idea of having Jess arrested, of seeing her in a courtroom, made me physically ill. David, I can't, I whispered. She's my child. His expression softened, but his resolve didn't waver. She is. And she and her parasite boyfriend just committed a crime that could leave you homeless and bankrupt. Your love for her is a given. But you cannot let that love blind you to the reality of what she has done. This isn't a mistake she made. This was a deliberate criminal act. He was right. I knew he was right. My maternal instinct was screaming to protect my child, but the rational part of my brain, the architect, saw the cold, hard reality of the situation. This was not a family squabble. This was a multi-$100,000 financial crime. David made the call to his contact at the bank. He put it on speakerphone. He was calm and direct, explaining the situation without emotion. The VP on the other end was initially skeptical, but as David provided more details, his tone shifted to one of alarm. He promised to launch an internal investigation immediately and to freeze the funds if they hadn't already been fully dispersed. The loan was finalized 3 days ago, the VP said, his voice tinny through the speaker. The full amount was transferred to a new corporate account yesterday morning. The funds were already gone. My heart sank. A corporate account for Elysian Fields? David asked. That's correct. After the call, David looked at me. Okay, the money is in their hands. That complicates things, but it doesn't make it impossible. The police report is our next non-negotiable step. It creates an official record of the fraud. It's our primary piece of leverage. We file it first thing in the morning. He then laid out the grim possibilities. We could sue the bank for negligence in their verification process, but that would be a long uphill battle. Forging a signature so perfectly, especially with access to all the necessary supporting documents, made it difficult to prove laxity on their part. The primary liability rested on the perpetrators of the fraud, Jess and Ben. The challenge would be clawing the money back from them. They think they're untouchable, David said, his voice hardening. They think you'll just roll over and pay the debt to avoid a family scandal. They're counting on your love for Jess to be their get-out-of-jail-free card. He paused, looking me straight in the eye. We have to show them they miscalculated. That night after David left, I walked through my quiet house. Every object, every photograph seemed to mock me. A picture of a 5-year-old Jess on my shoulders at the beach. Her high school graduation photo on the mantelpiece. The handmade Mother's Day card she gave me when she was 10, proclaiming I was the best mom in the universe, still tucked into the frame of my mirror. These were relics of a life I thought I had, of a daughter I thought I knew. The girl who wrote that card wouldn't have done this. The young woman who graduated with honors couldn't have planned such a cruel deception. But she had. Somewhere along the way, influenced by a charismatic con artist and the seductive allure of instant, unearned fame, my daughter had made a choice. She had chosen a fantasy over her family. She had chosen money over her mother. The 6-figure secret was out. It was no longer a secret but a ticking bomb. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that if I didn't find a way to defuse it, it would detonate and destroy everything I held dear. The grief was still there, a raw open wound in my chest. But as the hours ticked by, a new feeling began to crystallize from the anger and the pain. Resolve. Cold, hard, and structurally sound. Jess and Ben had made a critical error. They had mistaken my love for weakness. They had designed a plan based on a faulty assumption. And I, the architect, was about to show them the fatal flaw in their design. The next morning, I walked into the police station with David by my side. The air inside was sterile and smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. Filing a report against my own daughter felt like a profound, unnatural act, a violation of some sacred maternal law. Every fiber of my being wanted to turn around and walk out, to find another way. But David's steady presence and the memory of Jess's unrepentant face kept me moving forward. We sat with a detective named Miller, a woman about my age with tired eyes that had clearly seen their share of human folly. I laid out the story, my voice flat and emotionless as I recounted the details. I presented the loan documents, the forged signature, and a timeline of the events. Detective Miller listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she looked at the forged signature, then back at me. "This is a very clean forgery," she noted. "You're certain it wasn't you?" "I am 100% certain," I said, my voice like ice. The detective nodded slowly. "Identity theft inside a family is the hardest, and the ugliest." She took our statements, filed the official report, and gave us a case number. It was a small, flimsy piece of paper, but it felt momentous. It was the first formal shot in a war I never wanted to fight. "We'll open an investigation," she said. "But I'll be honest with you, these things can be slow. The financial crimes unit is swamped, and when the suspects are this close to the victim, it gets messy." As we left the station, I felt a strange sense of detachment. The emotional storm of the previous day had passed, leaving behind a cold, clear calm. The decision had been made. The path was set. Now it was about execution. "What now?" I asked David as we got into his car. "Now we do our own digging," he said, putting the car in gear. "The police are a necessary step, but they're a blunt instrument. We need precision. We need to know where that money went. Every single dollar. David, it turned out, was more than just a good lawyer. He was a bulldog. He immediately hired a forensic accountant, a quiet, meticulous man named Arthur, who specialized in untangling complex financial webs. Our first goal was to get access to the bank statements for the Elysian Fields corporate account. With an official police report and a compelling legal request drafted by David, the bank complied, albeit reluctantly. When the first statement arrived, it was like looking at a blueprint of my daughter's betrayal. The $600,000 had been deposited, and the spending had started almost immediately. It was a cascade of reckless, extravagant consumption. The first major transaction was a $75,000 wire transfer to a luxury car dealership. A quick search of Ben's social media confirmed it. A photo of him, sunglasses on, leaning against a brand new Porsche, with the caption, "Leveling Up." Entrepreneur success, your hustle. He had bought himself a sports car with my money. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. Next, we saw a down payment on a lease for a penthouse apartment in the city's trendiest district. The monthly rent was more than my mortgage. There were charges from designer boutiques on Rodeo Drive, Gucci, Prada, Louis Vuitton. Thousands of dollars on clothes, shoes, and handbags. There were bills from exclusive restaurants where a single meal cost more than my weekly groceries. But it wasn't all personal spending. Sprinkled among the luxury purchases were business expenses, or what they were trying to pass off as business expenses. Tens of thousands of dollars to a web development company in Eastern Europe with a generic amateurish website. A $50,000 payment to a company called Brand Momentum LLC. When Arthur dug into that one, he found it was a shell corporation registered just 2 months prior. The registered agent and sole officer? Ben. He had paid himself a $50,000 consulting fee from the loan money. The picture became painfully clear. Elysian Fields was not a real business. It was a fantasy, a prop in the movie of their glamorous life, funded entirely by me. They weren't building a platform. They were building a lifestyle on a foundation of lies. They were burning through the money at an astonishing rate, with no revenue, no product, and no plan beyond their next shopping spree. While Arthur traced the money, I focused on a different kind of investigation. I started paying close attention to Jess's social media. Her posts had become a daily chronicle of her new lavish life. Photos of her and Ben clinking champagne glasses on the balcony of their new penthouse, the city lights twinkling below. Videos of her showing off her haul from a day of shopping, bag after expensive bag piled on a bed. Stories of them at exclusive clubs and parties. It was all there, out in the public domain, a real-time feed of them spending my money. Each post was a slap in the face. She captioned the photos with inspirational quotes about hard work and dedication. Dream it, wish it, do it. Invest in yourself. CEO of my own life. The hypocrisy was nauseating. Her thousands of followers ate it up, flooding her comments with praise. You're such an inspiration. Couple goals. Living the dream. They had no idea they were looking at a life built on theft and deceit. I meticulously saved every post, every video, every story. I took screenshots of the comments and the captions. It was a digital diary of their fraud, and I was its most dedicated archivist. The most painful discovery came one evening when I was scrolling through her Instagram stories. She posted a video of her and Ben in their new apartment, laughing as they unboxed a new top-of-the-line video camera. "Big thanks to my amazing mom for being our first investor," she said, blowing a kiss at the camera. "She's always been my biggest supporter, and none of this would be possible without her." "We love you, Mom." The performance was flawless. She was playing the role of the grateful, successful daughter, using my name to lend legitimacy to her fraudulent enterprise. She wasn't just stealing my money. She was stealing my reputation, twisting my love for her into a public endorsement of her lies. That was the moment the last vestiges of my grief turned to cold, hard steel. This was no longer just about getting my money back. It was about reclaiming my name and teaching my daughter a lesson in consequences that she would never forget. A week into our investigation, Arthur found something interesting. A recurring payment of several $1,000s to a digital marketing agency. Unlike the Shell Corporation, this was a legitimate, if small, firm. David made a call. Posing as a potential client, he managed to get a junior account manager on the phone. He casually mentioned he was impressed by the work they'd done for Elysian Fields and asked about the scope of their project. The young man was surprisingly candid. Oh, the Elysian Fields project? Yeah, the clients are interesting. We're basically just buying followers and engagement for them. Bots mostly. They wanted to show a massive rapid growth curve to attract future investors. It was the final piece of the puzzle. The entire enterprise was a sham. The follower count was fake. The engagement was fake. The business was fake. The only real thing was the $600,000 debt they had hung around my neck. David, Arthur, and I met in my dining room, the evidence spread out before us. Bank statements, screenshots, corporate filings, notes from our calls. It was a comprehensive and damning portfolio of their crimes. We have enough, David said, his voice quiet but firm. We have enough to go to the district attorney. We have enough to completely destroy them in a civil suit. The question is, what's our goal? Do we want them in jail? Or do we want your money back? I looked at the mountain of evidence, at the story of greed and betrayal it told. Jail seemed like a just punishment, but it wouldn't fix the hole in my finances. It wouldn't save my home or my business. And a small, stubborn part of me, the mother, still recoiled at the thought of my daughter behind bars. I want to undo what she did, I said finally. I want to be made whole. But more than that, I want her to understand what she's done. I don't want her to have a single dollar left from this. I want her to face the consequences, not in a jail cell, but in the real world. A slow smile spread across David's face. Good, he said. Because I have an idea. It's unconventional. It's aggressive. But I think it might just work. We're not going to sue them. We're not going to wait for the DA. We're going to hit them where they live. In the world of image and public perception, he leaned forward, his eyes glinting. They used your good name to get the money, he said. Now we're going to use their fraudulent one to get it back. The architect in me recognized the beauty of his plan immediately. It was elegant, efficient, and perfectly designed for a single purpose: demolition. The plan David laid out was audacious. It was a high-stakes poker game where we held a royal flush. But instead of just showing our hand, we were going to convince the other players to fold and give us the entire pot willingly. The strategy was built on two pillars: the overwhelming evidence of their fraud and their desperate need to maintain their public image. Right now, David explained, leaning back in his chair, they are living in a fantasy world. They have the money, the penthouse, the Porsche. They feel invincible. They think the worst you'll do is yell at them and then, eventually, pay the bill because you're her mother. We need to shatter that illusion. We need to introduce a consequence so terrifying that giving back the money seems like the easy way out. The core of the plan was to bypass the slow-moving criminal justice system and the unpredictable nature of civil litigation. Instead, we would confront them directly, not with a plea or a threat, but with a business proposal. It was a counteroffer to the fraudulent deal they had forced upon me. The first step was to package our evidence. Arthur, the forensic accountant, compiled a detailed report, tracing every dollar from the loan to their purchases. It was a dry, factual document, but it read like a crime novel. David's legal team drafted a civil complaint, a document detailing the fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy, ready to be filed at a moment's notice. They also drafted a letter to the district attorney's office, summarizing the case and attaching the police report, ready to be sent. My contribution was the social media dossier, a curated collection of Jess and Ben's posts, each one a boastful admission of their lavish spending, carefully juxtaposed with the corresponding bank transaction. Together, these documents formed what David called the shock and awe package. It was an irrefutable, multi-pronged case that proved not only their guilt but also their malicious intent. The second step was to arrange a meeting. David sent a formal letter to Jess and Ben at their new penthouse address. It was written in cold, legal language, stating that he represented me in the matter of the commercial loan they had secured. It requested their presence at his office for a mediation meeting to discuss a resolution. Crucially, it advised them to bring legal counsel. This will spook them, David predicted. The mention of lawyers will make it real. Ben, the so-called entrepreneur, will see it as a business negotiation. He'll think he can talk his way out of it. He'll underestimate us. That's exactly what we want. They took the bait. A young, cocky lawyer, probably the cheapest one they could find who looked good in a suit, responded on their behalf and confirmed the meeting. The day of the meeting, I felt a strange sense of calm. I chose my outfit carefully, a sharp, professional suit, the kind I wore when presenting a major project to a client. I was no longer the distraught mother. I was the CEO of my own life, and I was about to oversee a hostile takeover. We met in David's conference room. It was an intimidating space with dark wood, leather chairs, and a panoramic view of the city skyline. I sat on one side of the long, polished table with David and Arthur. Jess and Ben sat opposite us with their lawyer, a man who looked barely older than Ben. Jess wouldn't look at me. She stared at the table, her face pale. Ben, however, was the picture of confidence. He leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips, as if this were all just a minor inconvenience. David began the meeting. He was all business, his voice devoid of any warmth. "Thank you for coming. We are here today to discuss the matter of a $600,000 loan obtained from United Commercial Lending, for which my client, Morgan Miller, was made a co-borrower without her consent. To put it in simpler terms, we're here to discuss felony bank fraud and identity theft." Their lawyer immediately bristled. "Now hold on. These are serious and unfounded allegations. My clients assure me this is all a simple family misunderstanding." David just smiled. "Is it?" He slid 3 thick, spiral-bound documents across the table. "Please take a look. One was for Jess, one for Ben, and one for their lawyer." Each was a complete copy of our shock and awe package. The forensic accounting report, the draft of the civil complaint, the letter to the DA, and my social media dossier. I watched them as they opened the binders. I saw the color drain from their lawyer's face as he scanned the first few pages of the complaint. I saw Ben's smirk falter as he flipped through the bank statements, his every purchase laid bare. And I saw Jess's hands begin to tremble as she looked at the screenshots of her own Instagram posts, her cheerful captions now reading like confessions. For 10 minutes, the only sound in the room was the rustle of paper. The weight of the evidence settled over them, suffocating their arrogance. The fantasy was collapsing in real time. When their lawyer finally looked up, his professional veneer had cracked. He was out of his depth, and he knew it. What is this?" he stammered. "That," David said, his voice like flint, "is the case against you. The one we will file in court and hand-deliver to the district attorney in exactly 48 hours. Unless, of course, you agree to our client's counteroffer." Ben found his voice, a weak imitation of his usual swagger. "You can't prove any of this. This is just a shakedown." Arthur, the quiet accountant, spoke for the first time. "Every transaction is documented and time-stamped," he said softly, without looking up from his notepad. "The IP address used to file the online loan application traces back to your mother's home computer, at a time when you, Jessica, were the only other person in the house. The corporate account for your shell company, Mr. Ben, received a $50,000 transfer that can only be classified as embezzlement or money laundering. The digital trail is comprehensive." The room fell silent again. Ben stared at Arthur, his mouth slightly agape. Then I spoke. I looked directly at Jess, forcing her to meet my gaze for the first time. "You had a choice," I said, my voice steady and clear. "You could have come to me, told me your dream, and asked for my help. But you didn't. You chose to lie, to steal, and to forge. You built your new life on a foundation of fraud, and now it's all coming down." I let that sink in before continuing. "But I am still your mother. And I am offering you one chance and one chance only to fix this." David took over, laying out the terms of our offer. It was simple, brutal, and non-negotiable. "First," he said, "you will return every cent of the remaining money. As of this morning, our accountant estimates that to be approximately $420,000. You will wire it to an escrow account under my firm's control by the end of business tomorrow." He paused, letting the first demand land. "Second, you will liquidate all assets purchased with the loan money. The Porsche, the designer clothes, the jewelry, the electronics. The proceeds will also be transferred to the escrow account. We have a detailed list of the items in question." He leaned forward. "Third, you will terminate the lease on the penthouse apartment, effective immediately. Any penalties incurred are your responsibility." Finally, he delivered the killing blow. "Fourth and last, you will sign a confession of judgment for the full amount of the loan, plus interest, legal fees, and damages, totaling $750,000. This is a legally binding admission of guilt and a repayment plan. A portion of all your future earnings, which we will garnish, will go towards paying it off. It is the debt you owe your mother." Their lawyer was aghast. "This is outrageous." "You're asking them to bankrupt themselves and admit to a crime." "No," David corrected him. "We are offering them a choice. The alternative is that in 48 hours these documents are filed. The police will likely freeze all your assets anyway pending a criminal investigation. Warrants will be issued for your arrest. Your faces and the name of your fake company will be all over the news. Your influencer career, Jessica, will be over. Your reputation as an entrepreneur, Ben, will be destroyed. You will face years in prison, and you will still owe the money. Our offer is a chance to avoid jail, to salvage a sliver of your future. It's the best deal you will ever get. I watched the conflict on my daughter's face. The life she had built for herself, the life she flaunted online, was dissolving before her very eyes. She looked at Ben, her eyes pleading. But Ben was staring at the table, his own fantasy shattered. He was no entrepreneur. He was just a petty con artist who had been caught. You have 24 hours to accept the terms, I said, standing up. It was my final word. The clock is ticking. David, Arthur, and I walked out of the conference room, leaving them with the evidence of their downfall. We didn't look back. The counteroffer had been made. We had presented them with 2 doors. Behind one was public humiliation in prison. Behind the other was a long, hard road to repayment, stripped of all their ill-gotten gains. The choice was theirs. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was the one in control. I had designed a new structure, a framework of consequences, and they were trapped inside it. The 24 hours that followed the meeting were the longest of my life. Every buzz of my phone made me jump. I alternated between a steely conviction that we had done the right thing and a gut-wrenching anxiety about the outcome. Would they call our bluff? Was Ben arrogant enough to believe he could fight this? Was Jess so far gone that she would choose to go down with him rather than face the reality of what she'd done? David was confident. They'll sign, he told me over the phone. The lawyer is inept, but he's not stupid. He knows they have no defense. He'll advise them to take the deal. It's a clean escape from a felony conviction. He was right. The call came the next afternoon, not from Jess or Ben, but from their lawyer. His tone was a world away from the blustering confidence he'd shown at the start of our meeting. He sounded defeated. My clients have agreed to your terms, he said, his voice flat. They will sign the confession of judgment. The wire transfer of the remaining funds is being initiated as we speak. A wave of relief so profound it almost buckled my knees washed over me. It was over. The financial threat, the looming legal battle, it was over. But I felt no joy, no sense of victory, just a deep, hollow ache. This wasn't a business deal I had won. It was a battle against my own child, and in a war like that, there are no real winners. Over the next week, the terms of our agreement were executed with brutal efficiency. The money appeared in the escrow account. A consignment company was hired to handle the liquidation of their luxury goods. The Porsche was collected, the designer bags and clothes were cataloged, and the penthouse was vacated. I watched it all happen from a distance, a detached observer of the dismantling of my daughter's fraudulent life. But returning the money wasn't enough. The final part of my plan, the part David had called the public announcement, was yet to come. It was the part I knew would hurt Jess the most, but it was also the most necessary. She had used her public platform to perpetuate a lie and had used my name to do it. I was going to use that same platform to tell the truth. I had never been active on social media. I had an account to follow Jess's activities, but I rarely posted. That was about to change. I sat down at my computer and with a steady hand I wrote. I didn't write with anger or malice. I wrote with a quiet, sad clarity. I told the story, not all the messy details, but the essential truth. I posted a single, simple photo of Jess and me from years ago, a happy, carefree moment on a family vacation. Beneath it I wrote the caption, "This is my daughter Jessica. I have always been proud of her drive and creativity. As many of you know, she recently embarked on an exciting new business venture, Elysian Fields. As her mother, I supported her dreams. Unfortunately, it has come to my attention that the financial foundation of this venture was built on a series of profound misrepresentations and illegal actions, all carried out without my knowledge or consent. To put it simply, my identity was stolen to fraudulently secure the funding." I continued. "To right this wrong, Elysian Fields is being dissolved, effective immediately. All assets acquired through the fraudulent loan are being liquidated to repay the debt. This has been a deeply painful and disillusioning experience for our family. I am sharing this not to shame, but to correct a public narrative that I was a willing investor in this enterprise. Trust and integrity are the cornerstones of any successful venture and in life itself. When they are broken, the consequences are severe and unavoidable. I hope that in time my daughter will understand this. For now, we are dealing with this matter privately. I read it over a dozen times. It was honest, direct, and devastating. I tagged Jess. I tagged Ben. Then I hit post. The fallout was instantaneous and explosive. Within an hour, it had hundreds of comments. The initial reactions were from Jess's followers expressing shock and confusion. What is going on? Is this for real? But soon, the story was picked up by local gossip blogs and online forums that tracked influencer drama. The narrative shifted from confusion to outrage. People started digging. They went back through Jess and Ben's posts, viewing them through the new lens of my statement. Their lavish lifestyle no longer looked inspirational. It looked like evidence. The photo of the Porsche, the shopping sprees, the penthouse. It all became a public record of their theft. The comments on their old posts turned vicious. So this is what you bought with your mom's stolen money. CEO of fraud. Enjoy paying that back for the rest of your life. Their online world, the carefully curated illusion of success, was utterly destroyed in a matter of hours. They were exposed as frauds, not by a court of law, but by the court of public opinion, a verdict that was far swifter and, in their world, far more brutal. Jess and Ben went dark. They deleted their accounts, but it was too late. Screenshots were everywhere. Their names became synonymous with a cautionary tale of influencer greed. Elysian Fields became a punchline. A few days later, a package arrived at my door. It was a small, unassuming cardboard box with no return address. Inside was a single handwritten letter. It was from Jess. "Mom," it began, the handwriting shaky and tear-stained. "I know there is nothing I can say that will fix what I've done. You were right. I was living in a fantasy. Ben," he made it all seem so easy, so real. "And I wanted it so badly. I wanted to be someone important, someone you would be proud of. I see now how twisted that is. I betrayed the one person who has only ever loved and supported me. I destroyed your trust and I broke your heart, all for a life that wasn't even real." The letter went on, a rambling, raw confession filled with shame and regret. It wasn't an excuse. It was an explanation from a lost girl who had made a catastrophic mistake. She said she had left Ben. She was staying on a friend's couch and had gotten a job as a waitress. She ended the letter with, "I know I don't deserve it, but I hope that one day, years from now, you might find it in your heart to forgive me. I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn it back. I am so sorry." I folded the letter and put it away. Forgiveness was a continent I couldn't see yet, a distant shore shrouded in mist. But the letter was a start. It was the first honest communication I had received from my daughter in over a year. The public announcement had done more than just clear my name. It had forced her out of the fantasy and back into the real world, a world where actions have consequences and where the bill always, eventually comes due.